What if some of the smartest sci-fi films of the 1960s were buried on purpose? Not because they were bad, but because they were too strange, too political, too dark, or simply too far ahead of the audience. Everyone remembers the giant classics, but these films were quietly pushed into the shadows. And honestly, some of them predicted the future better than the famous ones. Number 1. The Day the Earth Caught Fire, 1961. Before disaster movies became loud, expensive, and full of collapsing buildings, The Day the Earth Caught Fire made the end of the world feel terrifyingly quiet. The story begins with a simple nightmare. Nuclear tests by rival superpowers have shifted the Earth off balance. Suddenly, the planet is moving closer to the sun, temperatures are rising, weather patterns are breaking, and the world is slowly cooking. But what makes this film brilliant is not just the idea. It is the way the story is told through journalists trying to report the truth while society starts falling apart around them. There are no superheroes here, no easy speeches, no clean answers, just sweaty newsrooms, frightened governments, and ordinary people realizing that mankind may have finally gone too far. The film feels shockingly modern because it understands something most sci-fi of the time only hinted at. The biggest threat to Earth might not come from aliens. It might come from human pride, bad politics, and weapons too powerful for the people controlling them. For a film made in 1961, that is not just smart, it is almost uncomfortable. And that may be why it deserves far more attention than it gets today. Number 2. The Creation of the Humanoids, 1962. The Creation of the Humanoids looks cheap at first glance. The sets are small, the pace is slow, and the film often feels more like a stage play than a big science fiction adventure. But beneath that plain surface is one of the most disturbing robot stories of the entire decade. The world has survived a nuclear war, but humanity is damaged, weak, and shrinking. To keep civilization alive, humans have built advanced robots called humanoids. These machines serve people, help them, and quietly become more important with every passing year. Naturally, many humans hate them. They fear replacement. They fear losing control. They fear that the machines may become more human than the humans themselves. That is where the film becomes brilliant. It is not really about robots taking over. It is about prejudice, identity, and the terror of realizing that humanity may not be as special as it thinks. Long before modern films about artificial intelligence became fashionable, this strange little movie was already asking dangerous questions. What makes someone human? Is it flesh, memory, emotion, or simply the way they are treated? It may not be flashy, but the creation of the humanoids is quietly decades ahead of its time. Number 3. These Are the Damned, 1963. These Are the Damned is one of the strangest British sci-fi films of the 1960s, and that is exactly why it works. At first, it looks like a crime drama. A young woman, a rough gang, a lonely American tourist, and a seaside town filled with tension. But then the film suddenly opens a hidden door, and behind that door is something much darker. The government is keeping a group of children locked away in a secret facility. These children are not normal. They are cold to the touch. They have been raised apart from the world because they may be able to survive a nuclear future that ordinary humans cannot. In other words, the adults have already accepted that the world may end, and they are preparing children to inherit the ashes. That idea is horrifying. The film does not treat science as a miracle. It treats science as something cold, official, and morally rotten when controlled by frightened men in power. The children are innocent, but the system around them is cruel. This film was too bleak for easy popularity. It does not give viewers comfort. It gives them suspicion. And that is why These Are the Damned still feels sharp, bitter, and unforgettable. Number 4. The Mindbenders, 1963. The Mindbenders is not the kind of sci-fi film that throws monsters at the screen. Its horror is more private, more psychological, more human. The story revolves around experiments in sensory deprivation, where scientists place people in isolation tanks to study what happens when the mind is cut off from the outside world. That may sound quiet, but the film turns it into a nightmare. A scientist becomes convinced that the experiments can alter personality, belief, and loyalty. Soon, the question is not whether the body can survive isolation. The question is whether the mind can survive manipulation. This is what makes the Mindbenders so fascinating. It belongs to that Cold War era when people were terrified of brainwashing, secret experiments, and hidden control. But instead of turning those fears into a simple spy thriller, the film makes them domestic and emotional. A man's love, marriage, memory, and identity all become part of the experiment. The result is a film that feels colder than most alien invasion stories. There is no spaceship, no ray gun, no monster costume, just a terrifying idea. If someone can change what you feel, what you remember, and who you trust, then what part of you is still truly yours? Number 5. Unearthly Stranger, 1963. Unearthly Stranger is one of those films that feels small on the outside, but huge in its ideas. It begins with scientists working on a dangerous space project, but the real mystery is much closer to home. One of the scientists starts to suspect that his wife is not entirely human. She looks normal. She speaks normally. She behaves like a loving partner. But small details begin to feel wrong. She does not blink. She seems strangely disconnected from ordinary human emotion, and around her, people connected to the space program begin to die. The film builds its tension not with action scenes, but with suspicion. Every quiet moment becomes uncomfortable, because the audience is forced to ask, what if the person closest to you is the enemy? That idea was perfect for the 1960s. The age was full of fear. Fear of invasion, fear of spies, fear of hidden enemies living next door.
Not be able to sweat when it's hot. May not be able to grow their nails.
Unearthly Stranger turns all of that into a domestic sci-fi nightmare. It is not as famous as Invasion of the Body Snatchers, but it plays in the same dangerous territory. The film's power comes from restraint. It does not explain too much too soon. It lets doubt grow slowly, until love itself becomes frightening. Number 6. Robinson Crusoe, on Mars, 1964. Robinson Crusoe on Mars sounds like a joke title, but the film is far better than the name suggests. It takes the classic survival story and launches it into space. An astronaut is stranded on Mars after a mission goes wrong, and suddenly he must survive alone on a hostile planet with limited supplies, dangerous terrain, and almost no hope of rescue. What makes the film special is its patience. It understands that survival is not just action. Survival is problem-solving. The astronaut has to find oxygen, food, shelter, and meaning. Every small discovery feels important because the film makes you feel the silence around him. Mars becomes not just a location, but a test of human will. Then the story expands. The hero discovers another being, named Friday, and the film shifts from loneliness to trust. It becomes a story about friendship across difference, long before sci-fi made that theme common. The effects may look old now, but the emotional core still works. Robinson Crusoe on Mars remembers that space exploration is not only about rockets and planets. It is about fear, patience, intelligence, and the stubborn refusal to die. Number 7. The Earth Dies Screaming, 1964. With a title like The Earth Dies Screaming, you expect chaos. But the film begins with silence. That is its genius. A man wakes up to find towns empty, bodies lying in the streets, and civilization already broken. Something terrible has happened. But the film does not rush to explain it. It lets the emptiness do the work. Soon, survivors gather and discover that Earth has been attacked by robotic invaders. These machines are slow, stiff, and simple by modern standards, but they are still eerie because the film uses them like symbols of death. They do not rage, they do not laugh, they just move forward. The budget is clearly limited, but the mood is powerful. The film feels like a nightmare after the apocalypse, when the screaming is already over. And only the survivors are left to understand what happened. That makes it different from many invasion films of the time. It is not about stopping the attack. It is about waking up too late. The Earth Dies Screaming deserves more respect because it proves that atmosphere can be stronger than money. Give a film silence, dread, and a strong idea, and it can haunt viewers for decades. Number 8. The Time Travelers, 1964. The Time Travelers begins with a classic sci-fi idea. Scientists accidentally open a doorway into the future. But instead of finding progress, beauty, and shining cities, they find a broken world. Humanity has been pushed underground after disaster, and the surface belongs to dangerous mutants. The future is not a promise. It is a warning. What makes this film memorable is its pulpy energy. It has laboratories, portals, strange creatures, underground societies, and one of those endings that makes viewers sit up and say, "Wait, what just happened?" It may not have the prestige of more famous time travel films, but it has imagination pouring out of every scene. The film understands a simple truth that great sci-fi often uses. The future is really about the present. The ruined world reflects the fears of the 1960s. Especially nuclear anxiety and the idea that science might open doors mankind is not ready to walk through. The Time Travelers is rough around the edges, but that roughness is part of its charm. It feels like a wild comic book brought to life. And beneath the adventure, it carries a dark little question. If we could see tomorrow, would we be brave enough to change today? Number 9. First Men in the Moon, 1964. First Men in the Moon is often overshadowed by bigger space films, which is unfair because it has one of the most charming ideas of the decade. The story imagines that mankind's first trip to the moon did not happen in the modern space age at all. Instead, a Victorian inventor secretly reached the moon decades earlier using a strange anti-gravity substance. That blend of old-world adventure and science fiction gives the film a special flavor. It has top hats, strange machines, moon creatures,
ropes. It's like an abandoned mine caving in on top of them.
Underground civilizations, and the feeling of a storybook suddenly turning cosmic. The film is based on H.G. Wells, and it carries that older kind of science fiction, where discovery feels magical and dangerous at the same time. The real stars are the moon's insect-like inhabitants, the Selenites. Their world gives the film a sense of wonder that many more serious sci-fi films lack. It is not trying to be cold or realistic.
No, it doesn't mean a thing. Nothing at all. Man.
It wants to feel strange. First Men in the Moon deserves to be remembered because it captures a forgotten style of sci-fi. Adventurous, elegant, odd, and full of imagination. It is not just about reaching the moon. It is about finding mystery there. Number 10. Crack in the World, 1965. Crack in the World is exactly the kind of wild 1960s science fiction idea that sounds ridiculous until you realize how powerful it is. Scientists attempt to tap into the Earth's core as a new energy source, but when their experiment goes wrong, they create a massive crack in the planet's crust. And that crack begins spreading around the world. The film is dramatic, serious, and completely committed to its premise. That is why it works. It takes one scientific mistake and turns it into a global disaster. The danger is not an alien or a monster. It is human ambition drilling too deep, pushing too hard, and assuming nature will obey. That makes Crack in the World more interesting than its reputation suggests. It is a disaster film before disaster films became huge in the 1970s. It also carries an environmental warning before that kind of message became common in popular entertainment. Yes, some of the science is questionable. Yes, some scenes feel dated. But the central idea is still powerful. Mankind tries to control the planet, and the planet answers back. For viewers who love doomsday sci-fi, this forgotten film is a cracked little treasure. Number 11. The 10th Victim, 1965. The 10th Victim is one of the most stylish sci-fi films of the 1960s, and it may be one of the most prophetic. The story is set in a future where society has legalized murder as entertainment. People take part in a public hunting game, where one person becomes the hunter and another becomes the victim. The violence is packaged, sponsored, watched, and sold. That idea alone should have made the film legendary. Long before reality television, live stream culture, and celebrity violence became part of modern entertainment, The 10th Victim was already mocking a world where death could become content. The film is not dark in the usual way. It is colorful, fashionable, playful, and almost absurd. That makes its satire even sharper. The characters treat violence like a career move. Sponsors treat survival like advertising. Romance becomes part of performance. The whole world feels glamorous and rotten. Marcello Mastroianni and Ursula Andress bring cool star power, but the real attraction is the film's wicked imagination. It does not scream its warning. It smiles while delivering it. The 10th Victim was too strange to become mainstream, but today, it feels less like fantasy and more like an uncomfortable prediction. Number 12. Planet of the Vampires, 1965. Planet of the Vampires has a title that sounds like cheap horror, But do not let that fool you. This Mario Bava film is one of the most visually striking sci-fi horror movies of the 1960s. A spaceship lands on a mysterious planet after receiving a signal, and the crew slowly realizes that something on the planet can control the dead. The story is simple, but the atmosphere is extraordinary. The planet is filled with fog, strange colors, sharp shadows, and a constant feeling that the crew has stepped into a cosmic graveyard. Bava uses limited resources with incredible style. Instead of making space feel clean and futuristic, he makes it gothic, haunted, and dangerous. What makes the film important is how much later sci-fi horror seems to echo its mood. A crew answers a signal. A dead alien world waits. Human bodies become threats. Space is not a frontier of hope, but a trap. Planet of the Vampires deserves more attention because it proves that sci-fi does not need massive budgets to feel huge. Sometimes all it needs is mood, mystery, and a director who knows how to turn darkness into art. Number 13. Queen of Blood, 1966. Queen of Blood is a strange, eerie, and unfairly forgotten space horror film. The plot begins when Earth receives a message from an alien civilization, and astronauts are sent to rescue a crashed visitor from another world. They find her alive, beautiful, silent, and deeply unsettling. Then the crew begins to understand what she really needs to survive. The film has that special 1960s mix of space optimism and creeping dread. The astronauts believe they are part of a noble mission. They think contact with alien life will be a great achievement. But the alien they bring aboard is not interested in friendship. She is hungry, mysterious, and impossible to fully understand. What makes Queen of Blood work is its slow tension. The danger is trapped inside the ship with the crew, and every scene becomes more uncomfortable as trust begins to collapse. The film also features a young Dennis Hopper, which gives it an extra layer of curiosity for modern viewers. This is not the loudest sci-fi film of its era. But it has an idea that would become very familiar later. Space rescue missions can bring back nightmares. For that alone, Queen of Blood deserves a second life. Number 14. Seconds, 1966. Seconds is one of the darkest science fiction films of the 1960s, and it barely feels like traditional sci-fi at all. That is part of its brilliance. The story follows a middle-aged man who is unhappy with his life.
To the gods, Pan! To the gods of this place!
A secret organization offers him the ultimate deal. Fake his death, give him a new face, a new identity, and a second chance. At first, it sounds like a dream. Who has not wondered what life would be like with a fresh start? But Seconds turns that fantasy into a nightmare. The new life is not freedom. It is a product. The new face does not erase the old soul. And the man slowly realizes that the system selling rebirth may be more terrifying than the life he escaped. Rock Hudson gives one of his most unsettling performances, showing a man trapped between who he was and who he is supposed to become. The film's camera work is nervous, distorted, and claustrophobic, making identity itself feel unstable. Seconds was too bleak and too strange for many audiences in its day, but now it feels brutal, honest, and modern. It asks a question that still hurts. If you could become someone else, would you still ruin it by being yourself? Number 15. Fahrenheit 451, 1966. Fahrenheit 451 is not forgotten as a title, but the 1966 film version is often treated like a minor footnote, and that is completely unfair. Directed by Francois Truffaut, it takes Ray Bradbury's famous warning and turns it into a cold, quiet nightmare. This is a future where books are illegal, and firemen do not save houses from flames. They burn the books hidden inside them, as if knowledge itself is the real enemy. The scary part is not just the censorship. It is how normal everything feels. People are not screaming in the streets. They are sitting in clean rooms, staring at screens, repeating empty opinions, and living without curiosity. The government does not need to chase every thought when the public has already been trained to stop thinking deeply. Montag, the fireman at the center of the story, is not a natural rebel. He begins as a loyal worker. He does what he is told, but one forbidden book, one strange conversation, and one moment of doubt begin to crack his entire world. That is what makes the film powerful. It shows rebellion not as a loud explosion, but as a quiet awakening. The film feels more relevant now than many louder dystopian movies. It warns that a society does not always lose freedom through sudden violence. Sometimes, it loses freedom through comfort, distraction, fear, and silence. Fahrenheit 451 may look simple, but its warning is brutal, and that warning has only become sharper with time. Number 16. Quatermass and the Pit, 1967. Quatermass and the Pit is one of the smartest British sci-fi horror films of the 1960s, yet it still gets treated like a cult secret instead of a classic. The story begins with a discovery beneath London. Workers uncover strange ancient remains and a mysterious object buried underground. At first, officials think it may be an unexploded wartime bomb, but Professor Quatermass suspects something far more dangerous. What they find is not just a machine. It may be evidence that Martians visited Earth in the ancient past and changed the course of human evolution. That idea alone is strong, but the film goes further. It suggests that violence, hatred, fear, and mob behavior may not be accidents of human history. They may be buried inside us. Planted long before civilization began. That is why this film feels so disturbing. It does not show aliens arriving from the sky to attack mankind. It suggests mankind may already carry the alien influence inside its own blood and memory. The horror is not only outside us. It is under the street, inside the mind, and hidden in old myths people dismissed as superstition. The film mixes archaeology, science, folklore, religion, and mass panic with surprising confidence. It feels like a haunted house movie, a government thriller, and an alien mystery all at once. Quatermass and the Pit deserves more attention because it asks a terrifying question. What if the monster mankind fears is actually part of mankind itself, waiting for the right moment to wake up again? Number 17. The Power, 1968. The Power is a forgotten sci-fi thriller built around a frightening idea. What if evolution has already created someone stronger than the rest of us, and that person is hiding in plain sight? The film follows a group of scientists studying human abilities, intelligence, and endurance. Everything seems professional and controlled at first. Then impossible things begin to happen, and the group realizes someone among them may have terrifying mental powers. That setup gives the film its sharp tension. The enemy is not a monster outside the building. It is possibly one of the experts inside the room. These are educated people. People who trust reason, evidence, and scientific method. But suddenly, they are facing a force that can bend minds, create fear, and kill without touching anyone. The Power belongs perfectly to the late 1960s, when popular culture was fascinated by psychology, brain experiments, psychic ability, and the next stage of human development. But the film does not present advanced human potential as a beautiful gift. It presents it as a threat. If one person could control others with thought alone, morality would no longer be a choice. Power itself would become the law. The film works best as a paranoia story. Every conversation feels suspicious. Every scientist becomes a possible danger. Every explanation feels incomplete. It may not have the fame of later psychic thrillers, but it helped prepare the ground for them. The Power is strange, tense, and smarter than its reputation, with a concept that still feels dangerous today. Number 18. Je t'aime, 1968. Je t'aime is one of the most beautiful and painful time travel films ever made, but it is often ignored because it does not behave like normal science fiction. There are no heroic missions, no grand battles, and no simple attempt to change history. Instead, the film uses time travel to explore something much more personal: memory, regret, love, and emotional damage. The story follows Claude, a man who survives an attempt to take his own life. After this, scientists choose him for an experimental journey into the past. They plan to send him back for only 1 minute, but the experiment goes wrong, and Claude becomes trapped inside broken pieces of his own memory. Especially memories connected to a relationship that still hurts him. This is where the film becomes brilliant. Time travel is not shown as adventure. It becomes a prison. Claude does not move through the past in a clean line. He falls into fragments. A room, a beach, a face, a sentence. a mistake. The same moments return again and again, not because the machine is dramatic, but because memory itself is dramatic. The film understands that people do not remember life like a history book. They remember it through guilt, longing, confusion, and pain. That makes Je t'aime feel more human than many bigger sci-fi films. It is quiet, strange, and heartbreaking. And once you understand what it is doing, it becomes almost impossible to forget, because its real machine is not technology, it is grief. Number 19. Doppelganger, 1969. Doppelganger, also known as Journey to the Far Side of the Sun, has one of the strongest forgotten sci-fi premises of the late 1960s. Scientists discover a hidden planet on the opposite side of the sun, locked in a position where Earth has never been able to see it. That alone is a fascinating mystery. But when astronauts travel there, the discovery becomes far stranger than anyone expected. The planet appears to be a mirror version of Earth. At first, this sounds like a clever space-age trick, but the film treats it with seriousness and growing unease. The idea is not just that another world exists. The frightening question is whether reality itself has a reflection. What if somewhere out there is another version of our planet, our systems, our bodies, and maybe even our mistakes? The film has the clean, technical look of 1960s space race science fiction. There are control rooms, official meetings, rockets, doctors, scientists, and men in suits making huge decisions with cold confidence. But underneath that polished surface is a much stranger story about identity and uncertainty. The further the mission goes, the less stable everything feels, until discovery starts to feel like a trap. Doppelganger deserves to be remembered because it stands between two sci-fi eras. It still has the structure of classic space exploration, but its imagination points toward darker, more psychological territory. It is not only about discovering another planet. It is about facing a cosmic mirror and realizing the reflection may understand you better than you understand yourself. Number 20. Ikarie XB-1, 1963. Ikarie XB-1 is one of the most important 1960s sci-fi films that too many viewers have never even heard of. Made in Czechoslovakia, it follows a massive starship traveling through deep space in search of life beyond Earth. But this is not a loud space adventure full of laser fights and cheap monsters. It is quiet, serious, thoughtful, and strangely beautiful. The film understands space as something lonely and psychological. The crew members are not just explorers. They are people trapped inside a metal world, far from home, surrounded by silence, routine, fear, and hope. Their mission sounds noble, but the journey slowly tests their minds. Time feels different. Relationships become fragile. Even simple human emotions feel heavier when Earth is only a memory. What makes Ikarie XB-1 brilliant is how modern it feels. Its clean spaceship design, calm pacing, and focus on human behavior helped shape the kind of serious science fiction that later became more famous. You can feel its shadow in later space films that treated the future with mystery instead of childish excitement. The film also avoids the simple Cold War fear that dominated so much sci-fi of the era. It does not just ask what waits in the universe. It asks whether humans are emotionally ready to meet it. That is a much deeper question. Ikarie XB-1 deserves a place in this list because it was not just ahead of its time. It was ahead of the audience. And sometimes, that is exactly how a brilliant film gets forgotten. So, the next time someone says 60s sci-fi was only about rubber monsters and flying saucers, show them this list. These films were strange, brave, political, creepy, and sometimes shockingly ahead of their time. They did not all become famous, but maybe that is the real crime. Because forgotten does not mean weak. Sometimes, forgotten means the world was not ready.